All right, so I want to tell you guys something about Detroit that you probably don't know. So whenever I'm in Detroit or I'm going to an event, whenever we kind of say, we kind of greet people, we say, "What up, doe?" So now you kind of, so you know. So I'm going to say, "What up, doe?" You guys repeat back to me, "What up, doe?" So, "What up, doe?" All right, so you are urbanized now, okay? So, as you know, my name is Mack, Hendricks, out of Detroit. I'm going to give you a little bit of background of who I am first, and then I'm going to jump into a little bit about DSIP router, not really to be an advertisement here, but kind of give you some context of kind of the overall reason for me talking today is around dynamic SIP credentials. So a little bit about me, I'm computer science guy, right? Bachelor's and master's computer science, 15 years in VoIP. You see there on the screen my family. You see the dependency graph at the bottom, right? So those are all the people that depend on me. You notice that they really all depend on my wife, and then my wife depends on me. So they don't talk to me about anything because I barely can remember my name. A couple of things that I always talk to people about. Actually, quite honestly, coming here, and always before I do talk, sometimes I have to reflect on how did I get here. And one of the main avenues and how I got here is the things you see on the screen today. These are actually hanging up in my house today. Do you guys know what these devices are? Yeah, I figured I'm in a good crowd here. But however, when I talk to universities, they're like, "What are these things?" But these are the computers that my dad bought me. He bought me a VIC-20 from Montgomery Ward, which is a store that doesn't exist anymore. Kind of think of it as the Best Buy of today. And then he bought me a Commodore 64. The computer thing was cool. I loved it, learned how to program. But I think the thing that really started me down my journey of telephony was this device here. You guys know what this device is? Okay. It's a modem. I'm assuming you guys know that. It's the 300 baud modem. And I love this 300 baud modem. This was my favorite thing. And obviously, I got faster modems as time went. But it allowed me to get outside of my neighborhood because the people in my neighborhood, even though I came up in a very middle-class neighborhood, don't believe everything that you see about Detroit on TV. Very affluent neighborhood, well, middle class to affluent neighborhood, but nobody in my neighborhood was using computers the way I were. So this was a way for me to get out into the world and talk to people. And I did that through these things called BBSs, and I know most of you probably know what those are. And I started running a BBS. My mom was nice enough to get me a phone line so I could have a one-line BBS. Okay, so it wasn't like it was a massive BBS or anything of that nature. But what it taught me though is a couple of things. The first thing was that I was able to look at how they built the BBS software and figure out how to start learning different techniques for doing coding. And so if I fast forward to where I am today and do my journey, I used to use FreePBX the same way, right, to kind of figure out how to leverage and manipulate asterisks. So fast forward a little bit later, that's what I wanted to do for Camilio, right? So I'm so happy to see Daniel here, obviously. Big fan of the project. But I found, again, talking to all my friends and people who are in VoIP, trying to get them to understand SIP is very difficult. It's a big learning curve. So the whole value of, the whole reason why I created DSIP router was really to help people to get into SIP. And in particular, I wanted to get more younger people into SIP. And I know we all plan to be here till we're 90 talking about SIP. I want to get younger people to get involved and want to be able to, be interested. And maybe it's just me, but when I talk to young kids, nobody's talking about, I want to be a VoIP engineer when I graduate. So I think you sometimes have to meet people where they are and hopefully get them hooked. So my agenda for today is to give you a little bit of intro to DSIP router. Then from there, I'm going to talk to you about the real problem space that running an organization and company that we ran into, which is dealing with long-lived credentials. I know probably all of you have never left credentials on a box or been hacked or anything like that. I'm pretty sure you guys, that's never happened to you. I'll talk to you about like kind of the solution we came up with. Kind of talk through the architecture of what we've did, and this architecture isn't like rocket science. You can build this as well if you want to, but again, we're usually employing and hiring younger talent, so you kind of have to provide some level of cushion to prevent them from doing stupid stuff. So this is kind of one of the things we're doing. So then I'm going to give you a demo, and then I'm going to take some questions. So let's get into it. So if you look at DSIP router, at the main point of this is really to take all the great things that Camilio does, figure out some core use cases that we can implement, and kind of wrap a UI around it, right? Because you know, I don't even know how many modules now that Camilio has. It has a bunch, so over 200. So we really wanted to make it easy for somebody to pick this up and really handle two use cases: SIP trunking and also PBX hosting. If you look at the core components there, it's really, you know, it's Nginx, obviously Camilio, RTP engine, and then we've built a UI and an API around it. Just a kind of a pro tip here is that if you're new to just Camilio or RTP engine, at the very least, our engineering teams have spent a lot of time to package up and make it really easy for people to install Camilio and RTP engine. So if you just wanted to use DSIP router as an installer, you could. You can just go DSIP router install and just do Camilio. It won't install any UI to it. Likewise for RTP engine, same thing. RTP and it'll install it. So it takes away all of those issues. Also, we support a ton of OSs as well. So it's for the very least, you can use it as an installer. But we started on this journey in 2017. So why should you care? I kind of already mentioned why should you care, but the whole goal for us is to get more people on the SIP, adoption of Camilio, and really it provides a pipeline. So a lot of the folks that we're dealing with are people that have intentions and desires to become a SIP provider, right? And it's a specific journey to that. And sometimes they're starting off with just a free PBX system or a Fusion PBX system. They're starting to, obviously, starting to get some clients. But they get to a point where they need to start scaling a little bit. And they may put DSIP router in front of that to provide some level of the ability to kind of scale and kind of be able to remove and upgrade the media server boxes behind it. But at some point, they're going to outgrow DSIP router. It's a very normal thing. So what we kind of see this is as a path for them to actually implement much larger, more feature-rich Camilio implementations, which will obviously employ the people who deploy and build Camilio installations. So we kind of call it, this is kind of like a way to hook them, a drug to kind of hook them onto the bigger Camilio project. Some of the design principles that we have is really around this staying true to Camilio trunk. Really want to be able to start, somebody be able to start using this within 10 minutes of actually downloading it. Really minimal database during runtime. Now, this design principle, we failed at a little bit. We're re-architecting that a little bit to minimize it, because as we added more features, some dependency on the database became just needed more, and we're just going to start reducing that. Pushback on feature overload. This is another one where we kind of failed at, because people keep asking us for features, and we keep saying yes, but recently we started minimizing our features. We're not adding any new features. We're just going to optimize what we have. I always call it like we're going to optimize what we have on the truck, right? What we already have built, and then provide a guided path, right, for configuration. Is those are the principles. All right, so let's jump into the problem space. So the problem space of dynamic SIP credentials, or just the problem space of just having long-lived credentials in general. So if you think about how we kind of got here to DSIP router, we were actually building up Chameleon implementations over and over again. And even now, if somebody comes to us and they want us to set up DSIP router for them, we'll do it. One of the things that happens a lot, usually with legacy SIP providers, this doesn't happen with someone like SignalWire, but with legacy SIP providers, sometimes they don't have their SIP trunks ready to go, right? Surprise, right? I know you never dealt with that. I know that's a surprise to you. And so we're here setting up the system, but we don't have any, SIP trunking credentials in order to set them up. So what would happen is that one of the folks on our team would say, hey, we have some SIP credentials. We can go ahead and put it into the system and just test and validate that the routing is working as desired. Humans make errors, right? So they'll forget to remove the SIP credentials. And then what happens is then I get a huge bill because maybe it's a call center and they start using it, or maybe they get, I don't know, something happens, they get hacked, SIP fraud happens, something happens, and we are impacted by this, and we have to pay a huge bill. So we wanted to reduce that, and I'm going to explain how we're going to do that. The other thing that we see is that we do a lot of testing right now. And when we do builds, we do builds of DSIP router constantly, and we need to connect up to a SIP provider and do that. So we will generate dynamic credentials that maybe only last maybe 2 or 3 hours, so that we can do our testing, and then those credentials kind of go away. And then lastly, for some SIP provider, for people who are wanting to provide SIP trunking services, they can use this feature to create dynamic SIP credentials for their customers to be able to test their service. And then after a period of time, it goes away. So how do we do this? Now that we kind of explained the problem space, really the solution overview here at a high level is that DSIP is sitting there with all of your carriers. Kind of think of it as your broker for communicating with your carriers. And what happens is that we have a lease endpoint, API endpoint, and when you call that endpoint, it generates a set of credentials. You can stick those credentials into a SIP device, and then you can make calls out for a period of time. We say TTL, for time to live. So that's at a very 100-foot view. But if you really break this down, it's really Chameleon is really doing all the magic, okay, underneath the covers here. So really, Chameleon has all of the carriers, kind of defined, and inside of there, you have a couple of tables that we use for doing the whole leasing component, which obviously the API endpoint is part of DSIP router, but it's really just Python using Flask, right? So you can go build this today, and all we're doing is manipulating the Chameleon tables. So the two tables that we manipulate for this particular, so we have two versions of the leasing API. It's actually just a parameter. There's a username and password version, and then there's also IP authentication version of it. So for the username and password version, what you're doing is basically adding or dynamically generating a username and password and putting it in the subscriber table. And then we have a metadata table called DSIP_endpoint lease. And that table there is just responsible for understanding when these credentials should expire. And then there's basically a cron job that is cleaning up these leases. If you look at from an IP off perspective, kind of the same thing, but instead of it actually using the subscriber table in Camilio, is using the address table. And the address table is responsible for putting any IP addresses that are allowed to authenticate to Camilio. If you look at the lease API, again, this is not rocket science. It's really, you can do with a get or post. The main parameters is TTL, time to live, email address, or it could be any unique identifier just to kind of say who created this. You have the type of lease that you want to create. So I kind of said before, you can either have username, password, or you can have IP address. And then if you use IP address, you need to specify what is that IP address that you want to have. You want to allow access to DSIP router. So you can specify the IP address there. Likewise, if for some reason that you needed to remove those credentials before the TTL expires, you can actually use the revoke API call. So what that does is you give it the ID of the lease that was generated, and then you can revoke that that particular lease, which obviously destroys either the username and password in the subscriber table, or it actually removes the actual IP address from the address table. There's a Postman collection that actually shows how to use this. So it makes it, we're trying to make it pretty simple to use. If you can kind of see here what happens if you want to create a lease. You can see it comes back with the domain that you need to register. And you can kind of manipulate this domain. Like you could set up policies that says any request that's coming over from a particular user ID or a particular IP address, you can create these accounts in certain domains. And then you can say there's the IP address, and then, that's not IP address, but the password. And then you also can see the lease ID. The lease ID, as I stated before, is what you will use to revoke the actual dynamic credential if, for some reason there's some type of break glass event, i.e., it starts being, used in a way that you don't want those credentials to be used. Likewise, there's a revoke lease, as we talked about. It just basically comes back. You can call the endpoint, and then it comes back and said it was revoked. The use cases here, really, what we kind of call this, and it's kind of a running joke, is this is a SIP vending machine. So basically, it will generate. Instead of obviously spitting out candy, cookies, and drinks, it spits out SIP credentials, and then they expire over time. But the use cases here has been growing, actually. So we use it a lot in our CI/CD pipeline for getting credentials and injecting those credentials into instances of DSIP router that we're testing, or we use it in situations where we want to just allow somebody to create some credentials so they can use it for doing some testing on a customer's machine or environment. One that I just kind of added was, and I did it, this is the beauty of being at ClueCon and being around all of you great folks, is just Slack integration. So one of the things we wanted to do is be able to make it really easy for a support engineer to create these credentials. So you can just use a / command inside of Slack, and it'll provide a lease to you, and you can take those credentials and use them, or provide them to a customer temporarily. So let's just walk into a little demo of what this looks like, and kind of go from there. So this is the endpoint. I'm actually going to go ahead and see if I can just pop open a machine. Somebody's sending me, it's my wife. That's how it happens. All right, so let me just grab a profile really quickly, and then we'll jump in here real quick. Can you guys see that okay? No, you can't see that okay. We'll make that a little bit bigger. I'll put this onto another terminal here. Look at that. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and log in to our demo box. And I am going to just bring up my SQL, and we're going to take a look at the lease table here. Make this a little bit here. So what we're going to do is just use Postman just to create a credential. I'm going to change the TTL to 1 just to make it a little quicker here. Maybe yeah, we'll do 1 minute. So and then let's shoot it off here. So what you'll see here that obviously it came back with domain, the lease ID, password, what I kind of showed you before. And you'll see that this particular lease was created in the DCIP endpoint lease table. I can actually, if I go fast enough, I can actually register with this. Because I only did it for like 2 minutes. Take the password. It's so quiet out there. Let's see. All right, so we'll register. All right, so we're registered. Now we can make calls. And what you'll see in a couple of minutes here, or at least another minute, I would think, because I did it for 60 seconds. It's going to expire. And unless I screw things up, but it should expire. And then from there, you'll be able to, you'll see it unregister as well. So while that's doing this thing, I'm going to go here also into Slack. And one of the things we also did here is just add this. And probably Slack is probably a little small, but I'll make it a little bit bigger for you, is we just added a command called lease. And then also from there, you can also take these credentials and drop it into a SIP phone or some other device as well. One other thing I'll just show real quick is, let's see. Oh, I must have changed the TTL to being longer because, oh, okay, oh yeah, that one expired. I got a new one, so there we go. So I got a new one that actually got created there, so that's cool. So let's see if we can do a revoke really quickly. And let's do a delete. Cool. And we're going to revoke. And this one is lease ID 5. All right, so lease revoked. Lease is gone. So that particular lease for those credentials are gone. So again, this isn't rocket science, but it's just a way for you to be able to protect people from hurting themselves and protect them from hurting you. So this is kind of again, not necessarily something that's like so like, I don't know, like amazing that, nobody rocket science that we're figuring out. But again, for us, this has really helped us to minimize any type of issues that happens when we're helping a particular customer spin up a new environment. So I think I got a couple more things here, and then we'll finish it up. All right. So what we just go through a quick review. We intro DCIP router, discussed the importance or the problem with long-lived credentials, introduced the concept of dynamic zip credentials, discussed how to implement it, and then I did a demo for Postman, and then I also did a demo for Slack as well. So keep in contact. My information is there. You can do QR code. Please friend me on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, I'll take them now.
Okay, thank you very much, Mack. Yes, go ahead with a lovely round of applause. And just before we look for questions, just to echo what Mack's saying about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where a lot of people hang out. If you've seen a presentation that you particularly liked, write a little recommendation on LinkedIn. Say, I was at ClueCon, saw a great presentation about this particular thing. That would be, valuable for the people that came here and gave of their time to do these things. Okay, so anybody got a question? There's a question right there. I'm going to run over with the microphone, sir. There you go.
Thanks for the presentation, Mack. Sounds like you have a pretty good use case solved for testing credentials. Long-lived credentials that are used in production systems are another issue in cybersecurity. Yep. Have you looked at building a system like on top of the client that would fetch your API to get new credentials like every day or something that isn't lived for, God knows, years probably?
Yeah, that's a very common question. Just to put it in context, what he's asking about is really, if you think about like back in the day, FreePBX or even Fusion today, when you go and create an actual extension, typically the phone gets provisioned and those credentials typically live forever. Nobody's typically changing those, right, and rotating those. So to answer your question is, yeah, so we've been thinking through how we want to implement it is really what needs to happen. There's two things we've been working on. So the first thing was that we wanted to use HashiCorp. So HashiCorp Vault acts as a broker, and we were like, it would be really cool if we created a plugin for HashiCorp that would do a couple things. One, it would call out to DSIP router, get some new credentials, and then put it into Fusion. Or in some cases, you don't even need DSIP router for that. You really just need the credentials to rotate. So really, it would be Fusion or FreePBX calling out to HashiCorp, it rotating the credentials, and then from there, really just sending a notify to the phone. So that was one approach that we were thinking about doing. The other thing that we wanted to do is maybe just do a native integration to Fusion or FreePBX as well. But I feel like that's something that HashiCorp would do probably best, right? Because a lot of people use that in their environments. So having some type of plugin for HashiCorp for FreePBX or Fusion would probably be the ideal thing.
Great. Did you consider your question answered there, Justin? Good news. Okay. Who's got another question for Mack? We do have time for one or two more questions before we go into our break. And I dare say that Michael would supply some gummy bears if you asked a question as well.
All right.
Okay. In that case, let's give another big
he has a question.
Jack, you're not letting us down here, are you? Jack's 100% engaged here.
100%.
It's a pleasure to have you in the audience there, Jack. Go ahead.
So this should be a best practice for everyone to do this. This is good. This is just good familial hygiene to time out your credentials. I'm just thinking, I probably have some things that need to be fixed. This is just good. This is good best practice.
I think so. I think it's good for anybody, especially anybody who has a large support team or you have a large development team and you have to generate credentials a lot. I definitely think giving a person some long-lived credentials to use in different systems is just a recipe for disaster. So I think regenerating credentials and making it simple for them, just like the Slack integration, and making it very simple so they can go grab those credentials without having to go open up a Jira ticket to go get some credentials. This, to me, just makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Mack.